The awkward meeting. President Obama hosts Donald Trump at the White House.
We discussed a lot of different situations, some wonderful and some difficulties.
It was their first public step towards ensuring a peaceful transition towards power.
Donald Trump, go away!
But it came against a backdrop of protest as thousands across America voiced their anger against the man who will be their next president. I'm live in Washington with the very latest reaction to Donald Trump's victory.
Also on the programme tonight, the latest on the Croydon Tram disaster. The first victim is named as police say 6 men and 1 woman died in the crash. 2 15-year-olds are jailed for life for murdering a mother and daughter. And Prince Harry joins veterans to pay tribute to the nation's war dead.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale in Washington and Mark Austin in the studio.
Good evening from Washington, where just a short time ago, Donald Trump and President Obama met face-to-face at the White House here behind me. Now, despite the history of harsh words between the pair and indeed the bitter election campaign, there was no sign of animosity today. In fact, both spoke of their mutual respect. But it must have been pretty awkward, though. The Obamas, after all, were not expecting to have to invite the Trumps to the place that will soon be their new home. But as our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports, both sides want a smooth and calm handover of power. Well, that meeting was just a taste of what's to come for the president-elect, and we will have that report for you later. The report on creating the Trump administration now gets underway in earnest. His first tasks include putting a new White House team in place, including his chief of staff and secretary of state and defense. In total, he has to make 4,000 political appointments. The process of Trump becoming commander-in-chief starts with daily in-depth intelligence briefings, and there will be an emergency exercise known as a Black Swan before he actually takes office. And he'll have to prioritise key issues for his first 100 days in power. And that could be building the Mexican border wall, for example, repealing Obamacare, and economic measures such as cutting taxes and raising tariffs on imported goods. Well, it was Trump's economic pledges, such as doubling growth and scrapping trade deals, that so appealed to America's blue-collar workers in Tuesday's election. And his pro-business stance was welcomed by the US stock market today, with the Dow Jones reaching a record high. But as our correspondent James Mates reports, there'll be many obstacles that could stop Trump from keeping his promises.
When a candidate promises to overturn several decades of global economic orthodoxy, it's no surprise that Wall Street and most economic commentators were worried. But they seem to have adjusted pretty easily to the brave new world of Donald Trump, believing, it seems, that much of what he promised would not survive the campaign season.
Wall Street's initial reaction has been one of delight. The stock exchange here reaching record highs today as they look forward to less bank regulation and a short-term boost to the economy. But longer term, if there is to be less trade, if inflation, deficits and interest rates are all to be higher, well, some are a lot less optimistic.
The promises he made were pretty far-reaching.
We must replace the present policy of globalism, which has just taken so many jobs out of our communities and so much wealth out of our country, and replace it with a new policy of Americanism. America first.
By which he means scrapping many of America's recent free trade deals and a showdown with China over their trade policies.
We have a lot of power over China. We just don't know it. We have people that don't know it. The power is straight. We've rebuilt them. They are taking so much money out of our country.
If free trade is really off the new president's agenda, the impact on the world economy could be severe. And in that atmosphere, would Donald Trump really agree to a fast-track free trade deal with post-Brexit Britain? There are plenty here who are sceptical. James Mates, ITV News, New York.
Well, as I said at the beginning of the programme, President Obama has just welcomed Donald Trump to the White House here behind me. Both of them are committed to ensuring a smooth handover of power, as Robert Moore reports.
Ready? Okay. The Oval Office, this inner sanctum of power, has seen many remarkable meetings, but perhaps nothing quite like this. Donald Trump has never held office of any kind. He has been the peddler of racist conspiracy theories about this president, and yet here they were, discussing a Trump administration and no doubt the handover of those nuclear strike codes.
We discussed a lot of different situations, some wonderful and some difficulties. I very much look forward to dealing with the president in the future, including counsel. He explained some of the difficulties, some of the high-flying assets, and some of the really great things that have been achieved. So, Mr. President, it was a great honor being with you, and I look forward to being with you many, many more times in the future. Thank you, sir.
My number one priority in the coming 2 months is to try to facilitate a transition that ensures our president-elect is successful. I have been very encouraged by the, I think, interest in President-elect Trump's wanting to work with my team around many of the issues that this great country faces.
But beyond the courtesies, this will have been an immensely painful meeting for the president. Trump has vowed to dismantle the key achievements of the last 8 years, including Obama's healthcare law and the Iran nuclear deal. In what is clearly a sign of the likely trouble ahead. Last night there were anti-Trump protests in cities across America. This was California. Not large demonstrations, but angry and disruptive. Many people will not easily accept a Donald Trump presidency.
We reject the president-elect.
In Manhattan, they converged on the Fifth Avenue skyscraper, where the president-elect lives and works.
We reject
the defiance and the outrage of protesters bolstered by the fact that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote and only lost the election because of the Electoral College system. And in Washington, too, there was a march.
Not my president!
Many in minority communities telling me they fear that hate and intolerance will now be unleashed across America.
Can you ever accept him as your president?
Absolutely not! That's why I'm here!
These nationwide protests may be just beginning. The anger on the political left here is immense and could easily build towards inauguration.
That is still 70 days away, meaning the transition could be punctuated by anger and disturbances on the streets of this politically fractured nation. But these are the pictures that will enthrall some Americans and shock others. Trump inside the White House, a political novice and maverick, taking over the levers of power. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
So Barack Obama and Donald Trump have had their first meeting, and this afternoon Mr. Trump and Theresa May held their first talks since he won the election. He telephoned the Prime Minister at Downing Street and invited her to visit him as soon as possible. Our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is there tonight. So Chris, what does this suggest that their relationship is going to be like?
Well, Mary, it would be wrong to say that Theresa May was at the very top of Donald Trump's list as he made calls to world leaders. We think actually she was about 10th, and some are higher up on the list for geographical and political reasons like Mexico, Canada, Israel and South Korea. But Mr. Trump did manage to speak to the Irish Premier and Australian Prime Minister before the phone lines connected between Downing Street and Trump Tower. That said, though, when the two leaders did speak, we're told a very warm conversation. They mentioned, of course they would, the special relationship, that phrase that always has to be used whenever talking about links between the UK and US. In fact, Mr. Trump said that the UK is a very, very special place for me and our country. He even alluded to that relationship that was enjoyed between Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. The thing is, once you get beyond that comparison of having a president with a previous career outside of politics and a prime minister who's known for her hard work and sobriety, it's difficult to see where they would agree, like on President Putin, like on climate change, like on free trade deals. So I think there is a lot that they will disagree about, and that will be tested when the two meet in the new year.
All right, Chris Shipp in Downing Street, thank you. And let's cross straight away now to our Washington correspondent, Robert Moore. Robert, the handover of power has begun. We've seen it. What do you think will be the tone of the next few months?
Well, as you heard, Mary, President Obama made clear to the White House staff they should do everything in their power to try and facilitate this transition. But there's absolutely no escaping that Donald Trump is the man who perpetuated this myth about President Obama not being born in the United States. Not just a falsehood, but something that was deeply, deeply offensive to African Americans. No escaping either that Donald Trump has described President Obama as the worst leader this country has ever had, that on day one he is going to reverse Obamacare, that he wants to undermine that, in the view of the Obama administration, that precious, strategically valuable Iran nuclear deal. So we are now in this extraordinary territory where there is civility and professionalism on the surface, but underneath it, the White House team is seething. They are angry and they are seriously distressed at the direction that this nation is taking.
All right, Robert Moore, thank you. And that is all from the team here in Washington. Now let's go to Mark in the studio in London for the rest of the day's news. Mark.
Thanks very much, Mary. Lots more still to come on the ITV Evening News, including the latest from Croydon as the first of the tram crash victims is named. And Prince Harry joins veterans paying tribute to the nation's war dead. Those stories and more right after the break. Welcome back. A survivor of yesterday's tram crash in South London has told ITV News how he searched desperately for his friend after the carriages overturned. But Tom Dale could only see a boot 19-year-old Dane Chinnery had been wearing. Dane was later confirmed as one of 7 people, 6 men and 1 woman, who died. 3 others remain in a serious condition in hospital. From the scene in Croydon, Paul Davis reports.
While specialist investigation teams work to establish why this tragedy happened, first details emerged of the lives cut short yesterday. Dane Chinnery was the first to be officially identified. Like most of the tram passengers, the 19-year-old labourer had been making his usual early morning journey to work. His friend, Tom Dale, who escaped with severe bruising, remembers seeing Dane shortly before the tram left its rails and he blacked out.
I saw him on the tram when I first got on, because he normally gets on my tram. And then when I woke up, I was like, "Where's Dane? I can't find him. I don't know where he is." And all that was there on where he was sitting was his boot. And it turned out that he was actually under the tram.
Hours later, Tom was still making frantic efforts to contact his friend.
When I come round and been to the hospital and stuff, I phoned him. I've tried phoning him through Facebook. I tried to message him. Tried to text him, there was no answer on none of it.
Dane was a football fan and lifelong follower of Crystal Palace. Today, supporters have been leaving scarves and flowers in the club colours at the crash scene. The speed the tram took a sharp corner is still the main focus of the investigation. This video shows how, emerging from a tunnel, the driver should slow down to 12 miles an hour as the tram negotiates this bend. Survivor Ty Ajibullah, recovering at home, says yesterday's driver actually went faster.
When we get to the corner curve, the speed increased, and when it tumbled from its own track, about 1, 2, and it landed outside.
The 42-year-old driver, arrested yesterday on suspicion of manslaughter, has now been questioned at length and released on bail. Tonight, the name of a second victim has been given to ITV News by friends. He is Philip Seary from Croydon. The next stage of the investigation here will be an attempt to right the derailed tram carriages so they can be removed for closer inspection, work that will begin tonight but is likely to be completed tomorrow.
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Paul Davis there. 2 15-year-olds have been jailed for a minimum of 20 years each over the horrific murders of a mother and daughter in Spalding. The boy and his girlfriend, who cannot be named, were both aged 14 when they stabbed and suffocated Elizabeth and Katie Edwards as they slept. A judge today described their crime as grotesque and said their victims suffered terribly. From the court, Ben Chapman has more.
Leaving court tonight, the youngest couple to be sentenced for murder, each facing at least 20 years for a crime the judge said many would struggle to comprehend. Elizabeth Edwards and her daughter Katie were stabbed and smothered in what was called a carefully organised execution by 2 14-year-olds.
The planning that went into this brutal murders of Elizabeth and Katie as they slept in their own beds was cold, ruthless and chilling, as was the lack of remorse shown by the 2 juveniles afterwards.
You're not really on this, are you?
The court heard of the devastation and heartbreak caused by Liz Edwards' death, but her young killers held a grudge against her and her daughter. The judge described the young couple as being in a selfish, pathetic world of their own in which no one else mattered, a toxic relationship in which they'd kill for one another and they revelled in what they achieved. He said if they'd been adults, they could be going to prison for the rest of their lives. He called it an unparalleled crime, which has destroyed the lives of a mum and daughter and their teenage killers. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Nottingham Crown Court.
A British cruise passenger has died and 9 others have been injured after their bus crashed during an onshore excursion in the Caribbean. P&O Cruises say all those injured have been treated at a hospital in Dominica. A man convicted of attempted murder has been caught after 3 days on the run from Pentonville Prison. Matthew Baker was found by police at a house in Ilford last night. Police are still hunting for another man who escaped with him. 7 homes have been evacuated after a 15-metre wide sinkhole opened up in North Yorkshire. Emergency crews say the 30-foot deep hole opened up dangerously close to homes in Ripon. The area remains cordoned off. And numbers of golden eagles in Scotland have soared to near record levels with more than 500 pairs, according to a new survey. The Royal Society for Protection of Birds said there had been a 15% rise since 2003, when the last research took place. It's believed stronger penalties for wildlife crime has led to the population increase. And finally, Prince Harry was back on public duty today after his warning earlier this week about media coverage of his private life. He was at Westminster Abbey with the Duke of Edinburgh paying their respects in the field of remembrance there, as Nina Nanar reports.
Each cross carries the name of someone who died serving their country, and each November they are placed here at Westminster Abbey and elsewhere around the UK, a field of remembrance. More were added today. Two generations of royal servicemen standing side by side and leading the tributes. Prince Philip, who served in World War II, and his grandson Prince Harry, who served on the front line in Afghanistan. Prince Philip, now 94 and a veteran of this ceremony, shared the memories as the guests stood in line, back straight, like the old soldiers they are.
Very emotional, and when you look at all the crosses on the Bomber Command plot, which are only a fraction of the numbers of the 55,000 who were lost during the bombing campaign.
When a field of remembrance was first established here at Westminster Abbey in 1928, only 2 crosses were planted. But it's a tradition that has grown over the years, and there are now more than 100,000.
Prince Harry seemed relaxed and at home, greeting all in his path.
The good thing about having Harry is, obviously, he's been in a combat zone, done the business, and the troops respect him for that.
Not everyone got their greeting with the Prince right first time. Harrison DeGiorgio Lewis was told do it properly by his grandma, the 6-year-old proudly showing off the campaign medals of his uncle killed in Afghanistan. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
And that is it for now. Tom Bradby will be back later with news at 10. That's from the United States. But from everyone here and from Mary and the team in Washington, goodbye and have a very good evening. Bye-bye.